Picture a young woman in 1920 sitting at a factory table humming to herself. Her job is simple. Paint tiny numbers on watch dials with a glowing green paint. It's easy work. It pays well. And when she goes home at night, her hair, her clothes, even her skin faintly glow in the dark. Her co-workers think it's funny. They call her a ghost girl. None of them know that glow is going to kill her. This is the true story of the Radium Girls. It's a story about a wonder element that was supposed to cure diseases and light up the world, and about the young women who paid the price for it with their own bodies. It's also the story of how their fight in court changed the rules for every worker in America. Radium was discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, and by the 1910s, it was a sensation. It glowed on its own, no batteries, no charging, just a steady, eerie green light. Companies put it in toothpaste, in tonics, even in face cream. People believed radium was practically magic, a source of energy and health. Almost nobody understood that it was also intensely radioactive. One of the biggest uses for radium was military and industrial. Mixed into paint, it could make watch dials, clock faces, and aircraft instruments glow in the dark, which was incredibly useful for soldiers in World War I. The U.S. Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey, and the Radium Dial Company in Ottawa, Illinois, became leaders in this new industry. They needed workers with a very particular skill, a small, steady hand. So they hired young women, teenagers, some of them just 15 or 16 years old. It was considered a dream job. Better pay than a department store, better pay than most factory work. These women were proud to be dial painters. They dressed up for it. Some even painted their nails and teeth with the glowing paint for fun before a night out. The paint was called Undark. It was made from radium mixed with a phosphorescent compound, and it took real precision to paint the tiny numbers on a watch face. To keep their brushes fine-tipped, the women were taught a technique: lip, dip, paint. Touch the brush to your lips to shape the bristles into a point, dip it in the radium paint, paint the numbers, then repeat, over and over, hundreds of times a day. Every single time they did that, they swallowed a tiny bit of radium. It seemed harmless. The paint didn't taste like much. Supervisors told them it was safe. Some even said swallowing a little radium would put roses in their cheeks. So these young women did what they were told thousands of times a week for years. Here's the part that should stop you cold. The chemists and executives at these same companies, the people who actually understood what radium was, handled it completely differently. In their labs, they used lead screens, protective masks, and ivory-tipped tongs to avoid touching radium directly. They knew enough to protect themselves. The dial painters were given no warnings, no gloves, no protection of any kind. Why the difference? Because radium was expensive, and the company didn't want to waste it explaining safety to workers who touched trace amounts. But more damning, some executives and scientists already knew or strongly suspected that ingesting radium was dangerous. That knowledge just never made it to the factory floor where it mattered most. Radium is chemically similar to calcium. That's the cruel trick of it. When it enters the body, your bones mistake it for calcium and absorb it, right into the bone tissue, right next to the marrow where blood cells are made. Once it's there, it doesn't leave. It just sits inside the bone, radiating decade after decade, breaking down cells from the inside. At first, the dial painters just felt tired. Then their teeth started to loosen and fall out for no clear reason. Their gums wouldn't heal. Some developed severe anemia, their blood simply failing to regenerate. And then came something even more horrifying. Their jawbones began to rot away while they were still alive, a condition that came to be known as radium jaw. Doctors at the time had never seen anything like it. Bones that should have been solid were riddled with holes, crumbling like chalk. Some women suffered spontaneous fractures, their legs or spines breaking simply from standing up or walking across a room. Others developed tumours and bone cancers that spread through their bodies. One by one, the healthiest young women in town started dying. The company's first response was denial. They insisted radium paint was safe and blamed the women's illnesses on poor dental hygiene or syphilis or anything else they could think of. Some doctors, quietly paid or pressured by the companies, backed up that story. For years, the dial painters were told their agony had nothing to do with their jobs. But one man refused to accept that story. Dr. Harrison Martland, a New Jersey medical examiner, began investigating the deaths of dial painters in the mid-1920s. He developed tests that could actually detect radioactivity coming from inside a living person's body, proving, beyond doubt, that these women were radioactive from the radium lodged in their bones. Martland's evidence was the turning point. For the first time, there was hard scientific proof connecting the women's illnesses directly to their work painting dials. It was no longer a matter of opinion or company denial. It was measurable. It was real. And it meant these women finally had a case. In 1927, 5 dial painters from the U.S. Radium Corporation in New Jersey decided to fight back. They filed a lawsuit against the company. By then, some of them were so weak they had to be carried into the courtroom or could barely raise their arms to take the oath. The press started calling them the Radium Girls, and their case became a national sensation. The company fought hard, dragging out legal proceedings, hoping some of the women would simply die before the case was resolved. It was a chillingly effective strategy in cases like this, but public outrage grew too large to ignore. In 1928, U.S. Radium Corporation agreed to a settlement, providing compensation and medical expenses for the women. It wasn't perfect justice. No amount of money could undo what had happened to their bodies. But the case set a hugely important legal precedent. It helped establish that workers could sue employers for occupational diseases even when the harm took years to appear. Before this, the law struggled badly with slow, invisible poisons like radium. Meanwhile, out in Ottawa, Illinois, the same nightmare was unfolding at the Radium Dial Company. And one woman there would become one of the most remarkable figures in this entire story, Catherine Wolfe Donahue. Catherine had worked as a dial painter in Ottawa in the early 1920s. By the mid-1930s, radium had eaten away much of her hip and jaw. She could barely walk. But in 1938, she took her former employer to court anyway, testifying from a chair because she couldn't stand, describing in detail how she and her co-workers had been taught to point their brushes with their lips. Catherine Donahue won her case. It became one of the most important legal victories for industrial disease claims in American history, and it helped force real safety reforms in the radium industry decades after the first dial painters had gotten sick. She died not long after the verdict, but she died knowing she had won. The Radium Girls' suffering also pushed forward the science of radiation safety more broadly. Their cases contributed directly to new occupational safety standards, tighter regulation of radioactive materials, and a growing understanding that some workplace dangers don't show up right away. They show up years or decades later, quietly, in the bones. Today, Some of these women's bones are still radioactive, and scientists have studied their remains for decades to understand how radium behaves in the human body. It's a strange, sad kind of legacy, but it's also proof that their suffering was not for nothing. Their case changed how the law protects workers, and it saved lives that never even knew their names. The Radium Girls didn't set out to be pioneers, they just wanted a good job and a decent paycheck. But their courage in the face of a horrifying betrayal by their employers forced America to finally reckon with the poisons hiding inside its own factories. If you found their story as haunting as I do, consider subscribing for more true stories from history that deserve to be remembered. Thanks for watching.